This is just a quick demonstration of Logic as how we outline it in JRTV's Introduction to Podcasting class. If you're familiar with GarageBand, this is going to look really similar to that sort of interface and the tools that you're going to be able to use with this program. This is essentially a tool just to get you started with the basic controls of this software. We're going to start out. The screen we're looking at now is what we see when we start a new project in Logic. So as you can see here, under choose a track type, we're given a couple different options. We're going to go ahead and select just plain audio. Obviously, there are also options here to create music. If that's something that you're interested in, Logic is a great software for that. For the podcasting class, though, we're just going to select audio. And along with that, we're going to go down right here where it says audio input and make sure that we have no input selected. This is because we've already, hypothetically, recorded our audio onto the Rodecaster itself, and we're about to import that file into Logic to then cut up, trim, add music, whatever it is that you want to do with it. If you wanted to record directly into the Logic program, that's where you would go audio input 1. But since we don't have a need for that with this demonstration, that's why we're leaving it at no input today. We're going to also leave audio output at 1 and 2. Those are just going to be the default speakers that come with whatever device you're using, so we're going to keep that there. If we've taken the sort of traditional route by recording all of the channels on the Rodecaster onto one track, then we should just get a file that compiles all of those channels into one single track. So we're going to leave this number of tracks as 1. We're going to go ahead and hit create. Now, this is sort of the main interface that we're seeing with Logic. There's obviously a lot of different things you can do here. I'm just going to keep it to the basics today. Here we have that first track that we created under Audio 1. We have our mute button as well as our solo button. Over here is where the track will populate. If we click and drag on this line here, this is called our playhead. This is how we're going to seek through the track, but also choose points to take action, whether that's creating a fade, cutting out a section, adding music, anything like that. This playhead will move along the track as it's playing in real time, so you'll notice as I'm dragging this, the time code is advancing. So a couple different things that are being signified there. First thing I'm going to do is import in our pre-recorded segment. So we're going to do that by going up to our very top menu, going to File, Import, Audio File. Now, under my desktop, I created a little folder here, so I'm going to click in there, and I'm going to click this WAV file that has the actual audio recording of the conversation that we did during class. So this is just labeled Care Resources. I'm going to go ahead and hit Open. When it prompts me with this Change Project Sample Rate, I'm going to go ahead and change project. So we're going to click that. We now see it populated on that Audio 1 track we created, the playhead defaulting right to the beginning of that track. Some basic controls here. If I hit my spacebar on my keyboard, that is going to enable play.
Here today.
Oh, because Veronica, I am here to ask you some very personal questions.
So you'll notice once we play that track, we're seeing the levels bounce here on the Audio 1
You here
label.
today.
Oh,
We're
because
also
Veronica,
seeing
I
them down
am
here in this
here
corner here.
to ask you some
I
very
want to point out we
personal
have
questions.
our mute function there, so that's just going to mute the track, but it's going to continue to play along. If we had multiple tracks and we wanted to just focus on one at a
Yes.
time,
I have to tell you, I remember how
that's our solo option. So it would mute all other tracks and just play the audio from this one. So that's kind of the basic function there. We're going to disable all of that, pull this back.
you here today.
Oh, because Veronica, I am here to ask you some very personal questions.
So this dial right here is actually going to control your pan, so whether you can hear it more in one side of your headphones than the other. And then right here, this is going to be our gain control or our volume. And you notice as I'm dragging this back and forth, it's corresponding with where this one is moving down here in the corner as well. So this just gives you a more detailed view here with the actual number reading, whereas this is kind of more of a spiritual adjustment. You're sort of checking out the vibe with it, but this gives you the more exact reading down here.
You here today?
Oh, because Veronica.
We can also play
Here
from
today.
this top menu. This is where if, again, we selected, we wanted to record right in Logic and we had selected input 1, we could use this record button to record a second track right over this. That's another option for how you could go about using Logic with the podcasting equipment. But let's just demonstrate real quick how we would maybe cut out a section. There's a couple different ways we can do that. I'll first demonstrate with the trim, which is probably going to be familiar. So we just make sure whatever track we're wanting to change is selected. And we know that because it's highlighted. You'll notice if I click off of the track, it all just shows up in this blue, whereas when it's selected, there's this sort of very light white blue running across the top of that track title there. If I hover over the edge of the clip, you should see a bracket with 2 arrows in the opposite directions. This is where we enable that trim function. So if I get that up, click and drag back, I'm effectively trimming out that first portion of the clip. And if I were to move that back to meet the playhead and hit my space bar to play,
To ask you some very personal questions.
and then if we wanted to just get that whole section out, we could continue to trim it up that way, using the playhead sort of as a marker of where we want to end our trim, or at least begin the new clip.
We'll start with.
So that's one option there. Another way we could go about doing this is by actually cutting in the middle of the clip. So let's say you don't necessarily just want to trim the ends, but you want to make an adjustment in the middle or take out a chunk. The way we're going to do that is, let's sort of play along here.
We'll start with. What was your most.
So let's cut it right before he asks that first question.
What.
So that little bump that we see here is where that first question comes in. Let's use our playhead, give him a little breathing room, but let's consider this where we want to make our cut. Now that we have our playhead in place where we want to make that cut, I'm going to go up here to our edit menu. Notice there's a little drop down. We're going to click that, and we're going to find split. At split, it's going to be tempting to want to go to cut, but that's going to actually cut your entire file, this entire track that you've imported here. So we don't want to do that. We actually want to go to split, and we're going to select the option regions at playhead. So effectively split regions at playhead, meaning we're splitting this clip where we've positioned this playhead. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. The shortcut for this is Command T. So you could go ahead, and if you don't want to go to that full menu, you could just run this playhead across any part of your track, hit Command T, and it would make more and more cuts along the way. So now that I've edited split at playhead, you notice I've created 2 different tracks with my split that I can move around however I see fit. And the way that I see fit today is by selecting this first portion that had the part of the audio we didn't want, and then I'm going to go to my keyboard and I'm just going to hit delete. And now that I've done that, I can pull this back.
What was your most exciting experience with me?
And now we just start right out with that first question that he asked. A couple other things I want to demonstrate. Obviously, we're looking at the default view of this track here. If we want to get a more detailed look at this track, there are 2 different options. This first slider right above this ruler here is going to elongate the track so we can see some more details in this waveform here. And then if I want to zoom in on a particular portion of this, I'm going to go to the slider directly to the right of that. And that is going to allow me to get a more detailed view at individual moments in this recording. So that's what those 2 controls do. If you're trying to, cut out maybe just a second or 2 or even less than that, that's how you would be able to get a little bit more specific with it. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to add in fades. So again, I have my track selected here. And I'm going to go up to this same level where I had that edit menu, and I'm going to find this little button here that has a line, a circle, a line, and another circle. It's right next to what I call the bow tie button. So I'm going to go ahead and select this, and it's going to change our track so it's all sort of navy blue. But you will notice there's this very faint, almost orange line in here. And I have my mouse on it right now. I'm not sure if you can totally see it, but if I click on that line, it's going to appear yellow, and it's going to open up this track and make it actionable. So where we're at right now, it's showing us that this line is activated at negative 1.1 dB. That's for decibels. So if I wanted to adjust the volume outside of using these dials, I could click on this and drag it up and down to bring it to a different level. So I could bring it up to find unity, which is going to be 0.0 decibels, meaning we're not increasing or decreasing the volume of the original track by any amount. So this I can kind of demonstrate here. I'm not going to talk for a second. I'll just show you how this works.
What was your most exciting experience with me?
Oh my goodness. I have to tell you, I remember how nervous I was when I...
So that's just a quick demonstration of how that works. All you have to do is click and drag to adjust that volume there. But let's say that we want to add fades. This could also apply if we went File, Import, and added in a music file, let's say. Let's see if we can go about doing that. I'm going to select Trendy Hip Hop. And now I'm just going to drag that down. It automatically layered it over that top audio track. So all I did was click and drag on the title, dragged it down into the blank space, which created a second track now called Audio 2. So now I've got my Trendy Hip Hop music layered underneath my audio channel. So let's just hear what that sounds like now.
What was your most exciting experience?
So we're starting to get somewhere that feels a little bit familiar to the podcast that we've heard probably in our lives that have people talking but also have some music layered under it. But as it stands right now, the music is way too loud. We can't hear what the people are actually saying. So let's pull this back a little bit. And let's focus in on our music track here. So let's make sure that that's selected. I'm going to first create a keyframe, which a keyframe is basically an actionable point within a track. So without having to cut this track up into a bunch of different sections to make different adjustments to them, this allows me to just change a specific portion of a track without affecting the entire track. So what I'm going to do on the music track now, I'm going to find that unity line. I'm going to pull it in a little bit here, and I'm going to click right on that unity line. And it's going to create a little dot that says 0.0 dB. That's, again, just letting me know the volume that it's at. And now I'm going to use this to sort of pull all of this volume down, but maybe we want it somewhere around the middle here. And to create the fade, what I'm going to do is click on just this dot until I get that sort of intersection that we're seeing now. And I'm going to just pull the dot up to create a plane. And that plane is going to be what creates the fade for this music, rather. So I'll just play real quick so you can see what we just did there.
What was your most exciting experience with me?
Oh my goodness.
So then we would go into the full conversation. I think this is still a little bit loud for my taste, so we could pull that down a bit. And maybe even pull this down a bit further so we still get that dramatic change. But you'll notice as I'm pulling my playhead across, look over at the level in the left corner. It's slowly inching up as we move along, as it moves up that fade. So however long and steep this line that we create with our keyframe is, the longer that fade will take because it's taking more time to get up to the volume that we've selected to be at its max. And we've left our audio track up here at the same level, so that's kind of staying fixed. That's sort of what we're telling our audience to focus on. A good rule is to typically keep your background music and your main audio around 20 decibels away from each other. That's where we can really start to differentiate between the two and focus on one while still sort of appreciating what's in the background. Any less than that, it starts getting kind of distracting, kind of hard to decide which one to focus on. So that's just the general rule that we like to point out there. So if I were to now, and again, I guess I should say too, you can add multiple keyframes in here. You can create a bunch of different actions. So if I were to even on this slope here, create another keyframe by clicking on the line, I could pull this down even further. So we could potentially sort of start high, loop down, and then come back up over the course of this conversation. So let's hear what that sounds like.
What was your most exciting experience with me?
Oh my goodness. I have to tell you, I remember how nervous I was.
And then we can even move where these keyframes are after we've established them. So I can click and drag this forward so that it starts earlier in the recording. Let's pull that back.
What was your most exciting experience with me?
Oh my goodness. I have to tell you, I remember.
So those are just some basic commands throughout Logic. We've covered today importing in existing files, trimming, cutting, adding fades, as well as adding some animation to your file so you can sort of personalize that volume according to whatever sort of style you want to achieve. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer. That's going to be elena@grcmc.org. And thanks for watching.